Hi, how are you doing? This is Sir Jet, and I welcome you to another episode of The Contemporary World. Today we will have part 2 of the economic systems. Alright? So, specifically we will talk about the colonialism period. What is the economic system that prevailed during that time? Are you ready? In part 1, we talked about the economic system that the world experienced during the pre-colonialism period. So, we talked about the world evolving from the nomadic hunting and gathering economic system to the invention of the barter trade, from the measuring of wealth from animals to gold and into money. So now we continue the story. We ended with the world being divided into ancient kingdoms in the different continents, and that's the political setup. Now economically, we have what we call the age of mercantilism, the age of the merchants, and the people during that age traveled only or traded only in small concentric circles, as you can see in our map here. That means the merchants travel, okay, but the farthest they can travel is just their little corner of the continent. They don't travel intercontinentally to trade their goods. Okay, so for example, here in the Philippines, the merchants here that reaches our shore were just from China and the other parts of Southeast Asia, and probably India, the farthest probably. But merchants coming from Europe or Africa never reach our shores. Okay, same with our merchants. They just travel around the islands here. They don't travel too far. They don't even go to Japan or Korea. Just here in the immediate neighborhood. Okay, and so are the Europeans. They are just trading with one another. Okay, those small circles. They don't travel yet to the Far East to do their barter trade. They only do their barter trade in their respective corner of the continent. Alright, so that is the economic situation or the economic system prevailing during that time, until the world transitioned to the age of discovery. This is the time when the kingdoms of Europe started to look for gold, because they believe in the golden rule. What is the golden rule? It says, he who has the gold is the one who rules. Okay, you may have a different kind of golden rule, but this is what the European empires believed in. So they try to conquer other places where gold abounds, and they amass as much gold as possible, because they are measured, or their strength as an empire is measured by how much gold they have. That is the age of mercantilism. Okay, so they even travel using galleons to discover new continents and new lands where they can find gold. They indeed found gold in Mexico. There are lots of gold there, and then also in the Philippines, of course. And they colonized us. The Spaniards colonized us because of the so much gold that can be found on the soil here in the Philippines. Okay, so not only the Spaniards, but the other European kingdoms or empires also established their respective empires outside Europe. Okay, you have the Portuguese, the Dutch, the British, the French. Okay, and they discovered lands, they colonized the lands, they get the gold of the land, And that is the economic system. Now, what do we have now? Empires are operating intercontinentally. Before, the empires were just big land masses within their empire. But in the age of discovery, or the age of mercantilism, the empires now have territories outside their homeland or outside their continent. For example, we find here Spain, which is in Europe. Okay, before, the territory of the emperor is just over here, but because of the age of discovery, they have now colonies in North America, South America, and Asia. Okay, in trying to look for gold. Okay, so we have an intercontinental empire. 1, 2, 3, 4 continents. Oh, here's a fifth continent, Africa. Because Spain also had colonies over here in this part of Africa. Not only Spain, but also France, Great Britain, Portugal, the Netherlands. They would have colonies in the other continents. And so we have a new world order. Okay, a new world order wherein the center of power is Europe, because the seat of power of the empire, the palace of the emperor, would be in Europe. Whether it be Spain or France or Portugal, it's in Europe. That is the center, and the periphery would be the colonies in the continents. That's the new world order. As you can see in this illustration here, this guy, his name is John Bull. He is the personification of Great Britain. If the US has Uncle Sam and the Philippines has Juan de la Cruz, Great Britain or England has John Bull. And what do we have here? He has tentacles, lots of hands grabbing places in the other continents like India, Egypt, Malta, okay, Canada, what's this? Jamaica. So he is colonizing the other places in the other continents. And this is the world order I'm talking about. The center is Europe, the periphery would be the other continents. And this world order became stronger, okay, or became more established, the center becoming richer and richer, and the periphery becoming poorer because of the Industrial Revolution. Europe became the center of the world economy, okay, and the economy now is global. Before, the economy is just in the small concentric circle that I showed you a while ago. Okay, just your immediate neighborhood in your corner of the continent. That's just where your economy revolves. But now, in the age of colonialism, okay, these Europeans colonizing the other continents, the economy is now a global economy, because money is now revolving or involving lots of places all over the world, and everything is leading, all the money is cashing in towards the center, which is Europe. So the overseas colonies, they are what we call the periphery, and the center would be Europe. Now later on, the United States of America also became a center of the global economy, because the US also went through a period of industrial revolution. They also had their colonies and factories at home. Colonies in the other continents and factories at home. So Europe has that scenario. The US copied or developed, evolved into that kind of power also. So now we have two centers of the world. They are Europe and the United States. And what about the rest of the continents of the world? They are the periphery. Now, the Industrial Revolution made the centers richer. Okay? How? Why? Because that's where the factories are. Okay? And the periphery would be where the farms are, the sources of the raw materials. So there is now a role playing, okay, a division of labor of the places in the empire or in the world. The center where you have the ruling country, that's where the factories were built. And the periphery, you have the farms, which these strong countries or these strong empires control. And they make the people of the colonized world plant crops that would be brought to the center. So now we have countries that are called farm countries, and we have countries that are called factory countries. The factory countries are like Spain, the United Kingdom, USA, while the farm countries are their colonies, the Philippines included, okay, China and India, okay, Indonesia, and places in Africa, in South America. So their role is to produce crops, and their colonizers would bring the crops to the factories in Europe or America, and they manufacture them into finished products, and the finished products make them even richer. So that's how the global economy operates. There is now an imbalance because the center became richer and the periphery remained poor. Can you imagine that? If you are like, what crops do they get from the Philippines? Example, tobacco, okay, sugar. Do you know abaca? Okay, so it looks like a banana tree, but they get the fiber, and then they get this crops from our place. And in other countries, they make the Indians and the Sri Lankans, the British made the Indians and Sri Lankans plant tea. And then how much do you sell tea leaves or tobacco leaves or abaca plant? How much do you sell? How much will you, if you're the farmer, how much will you get out of planting those crops? Very little money. Okay? Maybe just 1 peso, 5 peso for every leaf that you give to the colonial master. And then if this raw materials goes to the factories and they manufacture it into cigarettes, they manufacture it into Lipton tea, okay, tea bags that you sell in the supermarkets all over the world. And then the abaca is turned into rope that all the ships in the world would need for tying up their cargo. And if you are the country who exports the finished product to all the countries in the world, your country would be a very rich country. Okay? And that's how the European countries became mega rich, because they control the factory and they control the farm countries, while the colonies remain poor because they just sell their products at a very low price to their masters, their colonial masters. Now, the age of colonialism ended, okay, and we enter a post-colonial era, okay. And when exactly is this? After World War II, because the centers released their respective peripheries. America released the Philippines. We became independent after World War II. And so are our neighbors like Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, India, okay, became independent, and the countries in Africa also became independent after the Second World War. Okay, now at first it may look tricky, or it may look that, okay, fine, we are now free from the yoke, from the burden of being a colonized country, and we can now improve economically. But you know what? After giving us their independence, they continue, the colonial masters continue to lord it over their former colonies economically. No longer politically, but economically. And that's what we call neo-colonialism. Neo means new. A new form of colonialism that the rich countries, the center countries, now implement over the periphery countries. They continue to be factory countries, and the countries that they released remain to be farm countries. And that's the first world and the third world respectively. The first world, they are the rich democratic countries, okay, and most of them are in Europe, plus the United States of America. They still have the factories, okay, and the third world, that's us. We are agriculture-based economies. We may have factories, but they are very few compared to how many factories there are in the first world. So in the third world, we still work the carabao to plow the farms. Okay? We still produce rice, coconut, abaca. We still produce sugar. We still produce tobacco, and these are products, raw materials that we send to our former colonial masters. Okay, and they manufacture it and sell it as finished products to all the countries of the world, and they still make lots of money out of that. Sugar, this is the raw material. What is the finished product of sugar? We produce it. Cuba produces sugar also. Many South American countries also produce sugar. It's the raw material for candy, chocolates, Coca-Cola. And these products are sold worldwide. So how many countries drink Coca-Cola? The United States make money out of these countries. But where do they get the raw material for Coca-Cola? From the poor farmers of the Philippines. There's a product called copra. This is dried coconut meat, and this is the raw material for shampoo. Okay? That's why we have a shampoo called Palmolive. Palm plus olive oil. Okay, palm coming from copra, and they are sold at an expensive price around the world. But they just buy copra or get copra from the poor Filipino farmer for a very cheap price. Okay, Coca-Cola, candies, Palmolive, tobacco are from the plants that are grown here and manufactured abroad, and chocolates. Okay, so as you can see, the old economic order remained. Even though we are politically free, we are still economically tied up to our colonial masters, because the order wherein they are the center and we are the periphery continues. Okay, so I explained this already, and these are the products that that the US sell worldwide, and the finished product or the raw materials, they just come in cheap, and so they continue to be rich. Okay, so who owns these companies? American companies. Who owns Coca-Cola, Palmolive, Marlboro, Kisses? Who owns them? American businessmen. Okay, and so they became richer and richer and richer in the post-colonial era. Now, not only in the manufacturing sector can we see the control of the rich countries, the first world over the third world, but also in terms of money loaned to the poor countries, to the third world. The third world needs money to build their country, infrastructure, okay, and other stuff, highways, buildings. We need money. And where do we get money? Most third world countries borrow from the IMF and World Bank. International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, they are in the United States. Okay, you borrow money, the country will borrow money from them, and they pay back plus interest. And so the rich countries who control the IMF and World Bank becomes richer and richer, while the third world continue to be buried in billions of dollars of debt. And so they have bigger control, or a stronger grip over the third world. Now, what happened in the second world? So we mentioned already what's happening in the first world and in the third world. At the same time that this neo-colonialism is happening in the first world and third world, in the communist bloc, we also see a dependency relationship. We also see a center-periphery relationship among the communist states. Because among themselves, they trade. They don't trade with democratic countries. If you're a communist country, you just trade your products with fellow communist countries. And the big communist countries are the USSR and China. They are the manufacturing countries also. They are the factory countries. And the smaller states like Vietnam, okay, Cuba, North Korea, they are the periphery states, and they are clinging on to the big communist countries for supplies of firearms and military hardware, tanks, guns, bombs, and that's what they trade with one another. Eh? AK-47 rifles, and battleships and battle planes, and they are just revolving. The trade just goes around in their circle, the second world. Okay, so that's the time of the first world versus the second world. That's the economic system that the world was experiencing. Now, backtracking a bit, when the Cold War was happening, okay, in the Middle East, something very important happened. Petroleum was discovered. Okay? Before, the world just uses coal for their needs of running the engines of transportation vehicles and factories. But with the discovery of petroleum, the world changed. Okay, so coal was slowly getting less popular because petroleum became the in thing. And where do they get it? From the Middle East, from countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran. Okay, so that's where they got, the world got the oil. Okay, petroleum is what the world calls black gold. It's color black, it's liquid, but the price is like gold. It's very precious. And who has the gold is the one who rules. So later on we will see that the Middle Eastern countries are also rising in power and controlling, getting a bigger control of world economics. Now, the countries in the Middle East were newly independent countries, and they discovered gold in their backyard, and they rose to power. So now we have a new set countries that are powerful economically, okay, but they are neither first world nor second world. How would you classify Saudi Arabia? They have lots and lots of oil, but they are not first world because Saudi Arabia is not democratic. They are a monarchy, absolute monarchy. They are not first world. They are neither second world because second world means communist, a strong communist country, and Saudi Arabia is not communist. They are a monarchy. And they are neither third world because third world means poor country, and they are not poor because they have lots and lots of petroleum. So how do you classify now these oil producing countries? They are neither first world, second world, nor third world. And they have an organization among themselves called the OPEC. And the OPEC are made up of Arab countries mostly, okay, in the Middle East and North Africa. And the OPEC is a very strong and powerful organization because they can control the prices of petroleum worldwide. Okay? How? By the amount or the quantity of oil they drill in their places. That will make the prices of gasoline all over the world go up or down. If they drill oil too quickly, that means they would have lots and lots of barrels of oil, and that means you have a lot of supply. And you know the law of supply and demand. If you have lots of supply, prices will go down. Okay? And if they drill slowly, so they will have few barrels of oil to sell to the world, and that means we have low supply. What will happen in the law of supply and demand? If you have low supply, prices will go up. So they just drill quickly or they just drill slowly, and they just toy around with the prices of the petroleum products all over the world. They just watch it and observe it with fun and say, okay, we are controlling the world because we have oil. And so we have a very powerful bloc, the OPEC. Okay? The OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. That's the meaning of OPEC. So now we have a new world order. Okay? The old order of having first world, second world, third world classification of countries is now outdated because of the OPEC, because of the discovery of oil. So we don't call anymore first world, second world, third world. Okay? And besides, communism also collapsed in the 1990s. So we have a rich group of countries that are petroleum-based economies, and they are neither first world, second world, third world. And then we have the communist countries giving up the idea of communism politically, okay? But economically, they are now a hybrid of some sort, okay? Because they have allowed what the first world is doing, like capitalism, is now being practiced in the former communist countries. So what now? The world, this system is now outdated, and so the world has now a new way of labeling countries. And it's just two groups that we have: the developed countries and the developing countries. Okay, developed countries, these are the countries that are rich. They are the controllers of the economies of other countries, and then they have manufacturing. They have oil. Okay, their economies are based on manufacturing and the petroleum, while the developing countries are not like the developed countries. They are primarily agriculture-based economies, And they're the former colonies, they're the former third world countries. And so we call them the developing countries. Now, where do we belong? The Philippines. Obviously, we belong to the developing countries. So this is the New World Order that developed or evolved after the age of colonialism. And that is the end of part 2 of our episode. So, what do we have now? Let's have a review. What have we accomplished today? Okay, we have seen the world transition from the colonial setup, wherein we have the center-periphery relationship. Okay? European powers, center. The other continents, the colonies, they are the periphery. Okay? They transitioned to the industrial revolution. Okay? And then they even became stronger. I'm talking about the European powers. And later on, America mixed it up with them. Okay? America became also a world power. And then later on, the economy transitioned. Then the third world became, the colonies became the third world because they became free independent states. But their colonial masters continued to lord it over economically. Okay? And then we have the OPEC rising and changing the landscape once again. It's no longer first world, second world, third world that we have, but developing, developed world.
But wait, there's more. There's a more recent way of labeling the economic standing of countries. Just this past few years, we don't say developing and developed countries anymore, but instead, we say global north and global south. When we say global north, we refer to the rich industrialized countries or developed countries. They are the former superpowers during the Cold War. They are called global north because most of them lie on the northern part of the globe. They are the USA, Canada, Russia, Europe, South Korea, and Japan. There can be patches of the global north in the south, like Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. On the other hand, the global south are the poor countries or the developing countries. Most of them are located south of the global north countries. They are Africa, southern part of Asia, South America, including Central America. Similarly, there can be patches of the global south in the north, like Mongolia, North Korea. But remember, this labeling of countries are volatile. They are temporary. Years from now, there can be a new way of classifying countries, or some countries may transition to go up or go down the classes, depending on global and local events that will create a monumental change in the economy of that country.
Okay, and that's where we end for this episode. We will continue the story next meeting. Okay? So this is Sir Jet saying thank you for joining me today. I'll see you in our next episode.